Here are video notes on how to figure out limiting and excess reactants. So a limiting reactant is the reactant that's, quote, limits the amount of product that we will have. The excess reactant is the reactant that's left over when the reaction is completed. So if we have an example here, we're going to use kind of a baking example to start. So for a weird cake, if our reaction is 2 cups of flour plus 3 eggs plus 1 cup of sugar, we're going to yield 1 cake. So we're going to treat this like our chemical reaction. So let's say that I have 10 cups of flour, 6 eggs, and 8 cups of sugar. So I'm going to start and I'm going to use T-charts to determine how many cakes I can make with each reactant. So my first step is however many values that I have in my beginning problem, I'm going to do T-charts and separate T-charts for each of those values and figure out how many of my product I can make. So my first one is I'm going to start with 10 cups of flour, and I know cups of flour is going to go on the bottom, and then I know I can go to 1 cake because I have my chemical formula here. So I know that 2 cups of flour is equal to 1 cake, so I'm able to make 5 cakes from 10 cups of flour. I know that with 6 eggs, I have eggs down at the bottom and cake on the top, and I have 3 eggs equals 1 cake, so I'm able to make 2 cakes with my 6 eggs. And then 8 cups of sugar, and I know that 1 cup of sugar is equal to 1 cake, so I'm able to make 8 cakes. So then my second step is after I've done all of my problems to figure out how many cakes I can make, I'm going to circle my smallest answer, because that's how many I can actually make. So in this case, I would consider the limiting reactant the eggs. Okay, so the eggs limit how many cakes could be made, because it's only 2 cakes. So I have excess flour and sugar. So we can calculate our limiting by doing our stoichiometry and then figuring out how many of each product is going to be able to be made, and whatever limits, whatever has the lowest amount of the product is considered our limiting reactant. So then the next step with limiting problems is that oftentimes we will ask you to calculate how much you have left over. So to figure out how much we have in excess, first we're going to determine how much is needed to match our limiting reactant. So for example here, if we were to look at flour, okay, what we would do is that we are going to take the answer that we circled in the step number 1 right here. We're going to take 2 cakes. We're going to take the answer that we circled and start with that in our upper left-hand T-chart. And then we're going to do stoichiometry back to the unit of our excess reactant. So in this case, we're going to go to flour because we have 2 excess reactants here. So we're going to start with flour as our first example. So we're going to do stoichiometry back to the unit of the excess reactant. So when we do that, we know that we're going to have 2 cakes here, cakes to flour. We have our units there from our balanced chemical formula up here. So we know that in order to make 2 cakes, we would need 4 cups of flour. So then my fourth step is that I'm going to figure out how much extra I have by taking 10 cups of flour available, which is what I started with, and subtracting how much I needed or used, which is what I calculate in step 3, to figure out that I have 6 cups left over. So again, I'm going to figure out how much excess I have, I'm going to take my cake value here, so whatever number I circle, and I'm going to do stoichiometry back to the units of my excess reactant. So in this case it was flour. So I know that to make 2 cakes, I need 4 cups of flour. So then I figure out, my question asks me how much is left over. Okay, how much do I have in excess of my reactant? And so then I figure out, okay, I started with 10 cups of flour, which is what I got right up there, and I subtract how much I calculated in step 3, which was 4 cups, and I'm going to get 6 cups extra. So, how much extra sugar do I have? So I'm going to start with my circled answer here, and I'm going to do stoichiometry back to the units of my excess reactant. So I'm going to go 2 cakes, and I know cakes goes on the bottom, and I know sugar goes on the top. And I'm going to go back to the units of my excess reactant, so cups of sugar, and that will be really helpful because sometimes this might be a longer T-chart. So I know that 1 cake equals 1 cup of sugar. So in order to make 2 cakes, I need 2 cups of sugar. So now my last step 4 is to figure out how much I have left over. So I'm going to take what I start with, which was 8 cups of sugar, and I'm going to subtract what I used. So I started with 8 cups of sugar, and I subtract 2 cups of sugar because that's what I calculated here, so that I know I have 6 cups of sugar extra. So there's a simple baking example for limiting an excess reactants. The next example will be using a chemical formula.